A sudden shift inside the royal circle has triggered the biggest shock in months. Harry's presence back at the palace has been confirmed, but the circumstances around his return are nothing close to ordinary. His arrival happened in secret, and the impact is already spreading through the family's inner ranks. But worst of all is Meghan's furious reaction. The recent move has turned into a full-blown power struggle. Ties once strained are being tested again, and every step Harry takes now carries a heavy consequence. Something pulled him back into the palace, and now the implications cannot be ignored. The unexpected arrival. The night shift security officer at the royal palace noticed a black Range Rover approaching Windsor Castle through the rarely used gate just after 11 o'clock in the evening. The vehicle moved slowly along the private access road that connected to the staff quarters and maintenance buildings. The driver displayed the correct credentials and security codes that granted immediate access without the standard checkpoint procedures. The gates opened and the vehicle disappeared into the shadows of the castle grounds. Prince Harry emerged from the rear passenger seat wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His personal protection officer walked closely beside him as they moved quickly toward a side entrance normally reserved for senior staff members. The door opened from the inside before they reached it. Someone had been watching and waiting for their arrival. Harry stepped through the doorway and went straight through the private corridors of the ancient building. The overnight cleaning crew began their usual rounds through the state apartments. At midnight, one worker pushing a cart of supplies along a hallway near the private quarters noticed lights on in a room that normally remained dark at that hour. Voices carried faintly through a partially open door. The worker recognized the deeper tones of an older man speaking, but could not identify the second voice responding. The conversation sounded serious and intense rather than casual. Another staff member preparing the breakfast service areas before dawn spotted unexpected security officials in sections of the castle that usually remained calm overnight. Additional protection officers stood at attention near doorways leading to the private family wings. Their presence indicated someone important had arrived without the advanced notice that typically accompanied royal visits. The officer on duty refused to answer any questions about the heightened security measures. The early morning shift change brought more people into the working areas of the castle. Staff members exchanged confused glances and whispered questions about the unusual activity during the night. Someone mentioned seeing a vehicle with tinted windows parked in the private courtyard reserved for family members. Another person reported hearing footsteps and voices in the king's private study well past midnight. The pieces of information began forming a picture of a secret visitor, a household manager conducting routine morning checks, noticed fresh coffee cups, and used glasses in the king's private sitting room. The items had not been there during the final evening inspection. Someone had clearly spent considerable time in that space during the night hours. The manager also observed that certain security protocols had been activated in patterns associated with protecting high-profile family members rather than routine overnight security. By 7 in the morning, word had spread among the palace staff that Prince Harry had somehow arrived at Windsor Castle without any public announcement or official schedule. The information passed discreetly between trusted colleagues who understood the sensitive nature of unannounced royal movements. Everyone recognized that such secrecy meant the visit involved delicate family matters rather than official duties or public engagements. The realization created an atmosphere of heightened awareness throughout the working areas. Staff members went about their duties with extra care to avoid any sections where private conversations might still be taking place. The protection officers maintained their positions near key access points. The security arrangements confirmed that Harry remained somewhere within the castle walls despite the approaching daylight hours. Kitchen staff preparing breakfast noticed orders for the king's private dining room included portions for 2 people rather than the single serving Charles typically requested for early morning meals. The specific dietary preferences indicated in the order matched known details about Harry's eating habits. This practical evidence removed any remaining doubt about the identity of the overnight visitor. The morning progressed with Harry still concealed somewhere in the private family quarters. His vehicle remained parked in the secured courtyard away from any public viewing areas. Palace officials made no statements or acknowledgments about any unexpected visitors despite the growing awareness among staff members. The careful concealment of details indicated the serious importance of maintaining absolute secrecy about Harry's presence. Senior staff members began calculating the implications of this covert visit. Harry had not set foot inside a royal residence in England for many months. His sudden appearance without Meghan or their children suggested urgent family business rather than a casual visit. The late-night arrival and extreme security measures pointed to conversations that could not happen over phones or video calls. Something significant was unfolding behind the ancient stone walls of Windsor Castle. The discovery of Harry's secret return spread through careful whispers rather than open discussion. Everyone involved understood their professional obligation to protect the privacy of royal family matters. Yet the knowledge that such an extraordinary meeting was taking place created an undercurrent of tension and curiosity throughout the palace. The next hours would determine whether this reunion remained hidden from the world or became explosive public knowledge. The real reason behind the visit. King Charles sat behind the large mahogany desk in his private study when a knock on the door announced someone's presence. Harry came in and settled into the leather chair across from him. The room smelled of old books and furniture polish. Heavy curtains blocked any view from outside. A single lamp provided warm light that cast shadows across the walls lined with family photographs and paintings. The king pushed a folder of documents across the desk toward his younger son. Harry opened the folder and began reading through pages of legal text and financial statements. The documents detailed various properties and assets connected to the royal estates. Some papers contained information about trusts and inheritances that would eventually transfer between generations. Charles explained specific clauses and provisions while Harry studied each page carefully. The conversation remained businesslike and focused on practical matters rather than emotional topics. The discussion moved to upcoming royal events scheduled for the next several months. Charles outlined his vision for modernizing certain traditions while maintaining essential ceremonial duties. He described gaps in the family's public presence that needed filling as various members reduced their workloads or stepped back from active service. Harry listened without interrupting as his father presented careful arguments about duty and legacy. Charles explained his declining health concerns and the reality that he might not have as many years ahead as anyone hoped. He spoke plainly about the burden falling on William and Catherine to carry the institution forward. The king acknowledged that the younger generation needed support and that family unity would become increasingly important. He suggested that Harry could play a specific role without returning to full-time royal duties or relocating permanently to England. Harry responded with questions about how such an arrangement would actually function. He raised concerns about media attention and public perception given everything that had happened over recent years. Charles presented plans that palace advisors had developed for gradual rehabilitation of Harry's public image through carefully selected charitable initiatives and limited ceremonial appearances. The proposals included clear boundaries and specific expectations. The conversation shifted to financial considerations. Charles detailed certain income streams and property rights that remained connected to Harry's position in the family structure despite his move to America. Some assets required periodic review and signature approvals from multiple family members. Harry discovered that several decisions made during his absence had affected his children's future inheritances. The revelations created new urgency around his involvement in family estate management. Charles produced additional documents outlining proposed amendments to various agreements. He explained how these changes would protect Harry's interests while respecting his choice to live independently. The modifications required Harry's consent and signature on multiple legal forms. Charles had clearly prepared extensively for this conversation with advice from solicitors and financial advisors. Every detail had been considered and planned. Harry took time to read through each document thoroughly. He asked clarifying questions about specific provisions and their long-term implications. Charles answered directly and honestly without attempting to pressure or manipulate. The tone remained respectful but serious as both men understood the weight of the decisions being discussed. Hours passed while they worked through the complex materials. The king eventually shifted the conversation to more personal territory. He spoke about regrets and missed opportunities for family connection. Charles expressed his desire to know his grandchildren better and to repair relationships that had fractured under public pressure. He acknowledged mistakes made on both sides while emphasizing his hope for gradual healing. The words came carefully but appeared genuine rather than rehearsed. Harry responded with his own perspective on events that had driven him away from royal life. He described pressures that had felt unbearable and protection concerns that had seemed ignored. Charles listened without becoming defensive. He validated some of Harry's experiences while offering different explanations for other incidents. The exchange remained calm despite touching on painful subjects. The discussion returned to practical matters as both men recognized they had covered the emotional ground sufficiently for one night. Charles outlined next steps that would require follow-up meetings and continued private dialogue. He proposed a tentative schedule for additional conversations over the coming months. Harry expressed willingness to consider the proposals, but insisted he needed time to review everything thoroughly and discuss matters with Meghan before making commitments. Charles accepted these conditions while emphasizing the time-sensitive nature of certain decisions. Some legal deadlines and event planning schedules created natural pressure points that could not be indefinitely postponed. Harry understood the situation but refused to rush into agreements that would affect his entire family's future. The discussion ended with both men recognizing progress had been made, even if complete resolution remained distant. The meeting was finally over at around 3 o'clock in the morning. Charles and Harry stood and shook hands formally. The gesture carried weight and significance that transcended the simple physical contact. They had communicated directly and honestly about matters that had not been addressed for so long. Whether this conversation would lead to lasting reconciliation or simply temporary cooperation remained uncertain as Harry prepared to make a decision. Harry's strange behaviors. Harry emerged from the morning meeting and moved through palace corridors with unusual purpose and direction. Staff members noticed him walking toward sections of Windsor Castle that held historical significance, but was rarely used by the royals. His path took him away from common areas and guest facilities toward private spaces filled with family history and personal memories. Palace workers exchanged glances, but maintained professional silence as protocols required. A housekeeper observed Harry entering a room that had been closed for renovations years earlier. The space remained largely unchanged from his childhood visits despite plans for modernization. Dust covers protected furniture that had witnessed decades of family gatherings. Harry moved through the room touching surfaces and examining objects that connected him to younger years. His behavior suggested he was searching for something intangible rather than any physical item. Security personnel tracked his movements through internal monitoring systems without direct intervention. Royal family members possessed access rights to most palace areas regardless of their current official status. Harry's movement followed no logical route, but instead jumped between locations connected by memory rather than geography. He spent several minutes in a small library where family photographs lined the walls in chronological progression. Kitchen staff noticed Harry passing through service corridors typically used only by workers. His presence in these functional spaces broke normal patterns of royal routine. He stopped to look at doorways and staircases that provided behind-scenes access to formal rooms. The perspective from service areas offered different views of familiar spaces. Harry seemed to be reconstructing mental maps of the palace from multiple viewpoints. A maintenance worker encountered Harry on a part upper floor that had not been used for a long time. He was examining portraits of ancestors dating back several generations. The paintings had hung in the same positions for decades, witnessing countless family dramas and institutional changes. Harry studied faces and read identifying plaques with careful attention. His focus on heritage and lineage seemed deliberate rather than casual. Administrative staff observed Harry entering the office suite where royal archives were maintained. He requested access to specific documents related to family history and protocol precedents. The archivists provided materials according to established procedures while noting the unusual nature of his inquiries. Harry spent over 1 hour reviewing papers and making notes in a personal journal. His research focused on questions of status, titles, and inheritance patterns. Palace workers whispered among themselves about the strange nature of Harry's activities. His behavior did not match typical patterns of family visits or official duties. The combination of childhood spaces, service corridors, historical documents, and ancestral portraits suggested someone reconstructing their relationship to the institution itself. Staff members recognized they were witnessing something significant, even if its full meaning remained unclear. Harry visited the private chapel where family christenings and small ceremonies took place away from public attention. He sat alone in the quiet space for nearly 30 minutes. Staff members maintaining the chapel kept respectful distance while remaining aware of his presence. The spiritual dimension of his journey through the palace added layers to what already appeared as a personal pilgrimage. Security logs documented every movement and location throughout the morning. The detailed record showed Harry accessing more areas in a single visit than most family members entered in months of residence. His comprehensive tour of palace spaces suggested either final farewells or renewed belonging. The interpretation depended on outcomes from conversations still taking place behind closed doors. Staff members working in private residential areas noticed Harry pausing outside doors to rooms occupied by other family members. He did not knock or attempt entry, but stood silently as if considering whether to initiate contact. These moments of hesitation revealed internal conflicts between his purposes for visiting and the complicated relationships that made some conversations impossible. A senior household manager compiled observations from multiple staff members into a confidential report. The document would be reviewed by officials responsible for security protocol and family affairs. Harry's unusual behavior required documentation, even though it violated no specific rules. The palace operated through careful attention to patterns and deviations from what was normal or expected. Harry's journey through palace spaces continued throughout the morning hours. His path eventually led him back toward the residential wing where he was staying. Staff members returned to normal duties while processing what they had witnessed. The strange morning had revealed a man caught between identities, searching for connections to places and history that shaped him while living a life separated from those very foundations. William discovers the truth. Prince William arrived at his office in Kensington Palace shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning. His private secretary waited near the door with an expression that immediately signaled unwelcome news. The aide closed the door carefully before speaking. He explained that reliable sources had confirmed Prince Harry's presence at Windsor Castle. The visit had begun late the previous night and appeared to be continuing into the morning hours. William stood completely still as he processed this information. His jaw tightened and his hands clenched briefly at his sides. He asked pointed questions about who had known in advance and why he had received no notification. The secretary admitted that the visit had been arranged with absolute secrecy. King Charles had personally managed all the logistics. No one outside a very small circle had been informed about Harry's arrival. The Prince of Wales immediately instructed his secretary to contact Windsor Castle and request an urgent audience with the king. The message needed to be delivered as a priority matter requiring immediate attention. William paced across his office while arrangements were made. His normally composed demeanor showed cracks of frustration and anger. He had spent years managing family tensions and public relations disasters related to his brother. This secret meeting felt like a betrayal of trust. Within 30 minutes, William departed for Windsor Castle. His protection team rushed to prepare vehicles and coordinate with palace security.